Hi, it's Christy Lister with Beyond the First Response, and I am lucky enough to have one of our local talents, on air talents, but also a friend who we've gotten to know each other over the last few months here. Jillian Bass, how are you?
Good morning. I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for being so honest. So, 96.7 FM, The Star in the Joliet, Illinois area, Will County area. You are the midday show host. And you have had on your program amazing mental health, mental wellness, every day. And it's inspiring. And so, even though you're not a first responder, you have gone through some traumas that we're going to talk about. Um,
hmm
but most importantly, you are hitting the ears of those first responders, families, citizens, and it's making a difference every day.
Absolutely. It's so important to me. And I know it's important to you too, is what we discussed, outside of here. It is so important to just talk about it and make it normal to talk about.
Right. And sometimes we don't even know what that we have that we're struggling with something until a trauma that you can't unsee happens. Right.
Absolutely.
And
100%. You can't get out of your head. You can't sleep, all that craziness.
no, no. And it lives with you. It doesn't go away. You just find a new way to
Cope
release
with
it or
it.
let it. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect.
Cope with
Perfectly
it.
said. So last year, it was last summer, right?
Yep. It was June of last year.
Okay. Last summer, baseball game, local park district, Plainfield Park District, normal day. They've got baseball fields, soccer fields,
Huge park.
skateboard.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Everything under the sun. There's always people there. You were there for a baseball tournament with your son.
Correct.
And then the ultimate, we were discussing this before we came on the air. Nor civilian people have a trauma like this 1 to 3 times in their lifetime on average. A first responder, it's 600 to 800 plus times in a lifetime. So it affects you with one, which we're about to get into. I can't imagine how it affects you with that many piling up and not knowing how to process it or not being taught to process it or think you can.
Absolutely. Just the one traumatic experience that we had, as you were mentioning, it was my son's baseball game. It was late at night. We've been to this park. It was our home field, been there many, many times. And as we're walking to our car, there was porta potties was the only thing right there. And that is very important to the whole thing. We start going. Both the kids have to stop to use the bathroom. My son was 10. My little guy, he was just turned 3 like a couple months before that. So he's a little. Walking to the car, all of a sudden we hear these crazy noises. And let me just say, I have never heard a gunshot in my entire life. I've never been exposed to it. So I didn't really even know what it was at first. But we're walking to the car. Kids just got done using the bathroom, walking to our car. All of a sudden we hear it in the distance in the parking lot, not too far away from us. And at first we thought it was fireworks until we literally looked to our left and we were like, oh my goodness, there is 2 cars, 10 people, maybe a little less than that, shooting at each other, literally in the parking lot with my children there. I, again, never have been exposed to that. So immediately go into mom mode. You think you're going to plan what I would do in these situations, but you truly
Right.
never really know. So the only thing, like I said, the only safe place, there was one other family with us. Everyone else had left. Um, I told my children, get behind the porta potties. And they jumped behind the porta potties because that was literally the only physical place for them to be. And that resonates in my head for forever. Like, get
Oh,
behind the
yeah.
porta potty, get behind the porta potty. And luckily my husband was there, my dad was there. So we're all freaking out, what do we do? We just wanted to make sure the kids were protected. That was the biggest thing.
Right.
And then I jumped in my dad's car and I was like, let's call 911. Let's get the people here. And, you plan all these things, make sure you can see what's happening, make sure you can visualize, everything that you see and to let the police know. And thankfully, again, first responders are so amazing. We met up with them, talked about everything we possibly could know. But that experience was so heartbreaking and life-changing for me because, again, you do your best to protect your kids, and
Right.
having to see that not only for myself, but just it affected me way more having my kids see something like that. And something else after that, I'll keep going. Once we started leaving the parking lot, because the police are like, get out of there as fast as you can. So we, round the kids up, leave. As we're leaving, and this is like the traumatic experience for me too, as we leaving, we saw a vehicle with the doors open, and we saw, unfortunately, a body on the ground in the distance. And we did not tell my 10-year-old at the time, like what the outcome of that was. We're trying to keep that from him. But just knowing that somebody passed away from gun violence was just horrifying. And
Right.
it ate at me for days, and I couldn't sleep. And as you said, like the trauma is just, yes, it took me many times of nights crying and just being so scared and afraid, and it changed my whole life, my kids' lives. We didn't go anywhere. My kids, are traumatized from it. I have a hard time going in parking lots at nighttime, like all of that stuff for a long time. It literally, one thing can change your whole life, as I'm sure you've experienced before too.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, we think, oh, it won't affect us when it happens, but it adds up. And you're protecting your kids, and reliving that is PTSD that you've chosen to get help for. Thankfully, you've recognized that. But it changed. I remember when we were talking, it changed your whole outlook, and realizing that wasn't the only reason to start having conversations, but that was the eye opener, the aha moment. Like, and especially, so those of our listeners, Plainfield, Illinois isn't a high crime area at all. It's your typical suburban, family raising suburban city that has, facilities like that people are at all the time, things to do downtown. And you live your life here thinking it's going to be safe. But that's the problem. We get complacent maybe, and then it'll never happen here until it does.
And that's one of the scary parts too, because we do not live far from there. That's what we call home. We go there regularly outside of baseball. It's a local place that I've grew up out in Plainfield. So just to have it that close to where like my parents' house is like 5 minutes from there. So it was just so scary, and it literally just changed my lives. And it did affect me on so many levels. Like, who can I trust if I can't even go to my local park? Where is it safe for my kids to go? I went through that whole thing and myself, and it definitely changed me as a person. It changed me as a mom, and it scared me. It scared my kids. And like you said, I did finally seek help. And of course, there's lots of different things that happened growing up. And I knew mental health was something, and therapy is something I always was interested in. But I knew if I didn't go right then and there, I would be to a point of like no return almost in my head. Like I felt like I had to get the help. And it was okay to get the help that I needed. So I did start therapy August. So I waited a couple months, but it was like a couple months of agony. Literally, we didn't go anywhere for those months. Like, I wouldn't leave my kid's side for like those 3 months.
Oh yeah, and you feel trapped in your own body then, or trapped in your own home. That even going into work. I mean, you're lucky enough, thank you COVID, that you can record from home. So that probably helped, but it also, then you don't have a reason to leave, and you find other reasons not to leave. Yeah,
and you isolate yourself anywhere. We did it. I grocery shopped, like picked up. That's it. I didn't want to go into the parking lot to like. It did. My kids too. And I think that's where, as a mom and as an adult, like obviously our most important job is to protect our kids and to make sure they're safe. And you almost feel like a failure. And I did. I felt like, oh my gosh. And of course it had nothing to do. It was out of my control. But that was the first thing, was like, I failed my kids. I'm supposed to protect them. And I didn't. Although realistically, I did protect them.
You absolutely did.
You know what I mean? But it's really hard in our own minds and the way that our brain works. We just feel like a failure. And I failed my kids and all these things that we as adults, we struggle with. And it is a huge thing to our mental health. It just spirals. Like all the negative thoughts, all the bad things just keep going and going. And when realistically, I did everything I possibly could. And that's what I've learned at therapy, is like, I did exactly what I should have done. I protected my kids, and we were all safe. That was the most important part.
That fight or flight kicked in, and you kind of did both at the same time without realizing it.
Correct. And I didn't realize that until therapy, but therapy was like life-changing, because she made me realize, like, yes, it was scary. Yes, your kids were at harm's way a little bit, but you did everything you were supposed to do. And had I not gone to therapy and talked about it, I would still have those thoughts in my head that I did something wrong when I didn't.
Right. No, not at all. Not at all. And there's many more people from that night there that are dealing with the same thing, when the ones walking to their cars. And it's unfortunate, because these were teenagers that did this, 18, 19, 20-year-olds.
I think the kid that passed away was 19. Yeah, a local kid too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it just, it blows my mind that that's become normal in every city. and has nothing to do with anything but choices that people are making.
It makes me so sad. And that's another thing to
So,
worry about too.
yeah.
Exposure to that. Like,
Mhm.
and you think deeper to that level, like what happened to those kids? Why did they feel that this was where they had to resort to? And they could have had their own traumas. Like that's where I started thinking,
Yes.
I started having empathy for why they were the way they were and what caused them to think that that was the only outlet that they had. So it goes so much deeper when you start to
It
like
really
analyze your
does.
lives.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
does. But that's also healing. And that's why
Absolutely.
it's so important for you when you hit the air, to talk about it and to find something good every day. And people are learning every minute from it. So when you did this, obviously you didn't talk about it on the radio.
I did not know. I kept it quiet because it was so fresh and I didn't want to be exposed to any of that. Like I was scared, like, because I don't think they caught the person right away or anything like that. And I was like, I do not want my name affiliated with my kids
Right.
or no, like, might have been a small chance somebody knew who I was, but still, it was just the fact that like I'm local.
Yeah. Well, and I
So
got to
it
tell you
scared
on
me a little
that.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And on that, when people hear you on air and they see your name or hear your voice, they can relate like, oh, that voice sounds familiar because they'll do
Hmm.
that. So I do the radio for mortgage lending. So for
Yep.
M&M Bank mortgage lending, and people will say, I heard your voice. I'm like, and it's weird to me because I'm just doing my job.
Yep. Yep.
But they do, they recognize, and it's kind of awkward. So
Agreed.
you're more,
Yes.
you take a step back and you're more, okay, I can't really flick that guy off that just pulled out in front of
Correct.
me because my
Yes.
God, they might recognize me because they know what car I have thanks to somebody who said it on air. I'm like, oh, God.
Yes, you have to think about those things. And I think it's important for us to do that too. I think in general, people in general, not just, us people recognizing this, but maybe take a second to think about what you're going to say before you do
Yes,
it. Because mental health, you have no idea what somebody is going through on every day. And, that's what I talk about on my show. Like you
yeah,
truly have no idea what somebody is experiencing on a daily basis. So you responding to them and, the way you're feeling at that moment could set them off and make them have a worse day, or you be smiling at them could make their day that much better.
exactly. And it's that knee jerk reaction that we, because we're in a hurry, we just had a bad day, whatever, our instinct is to jump down somebody's throat or flick them off or say things that you can't take back
Correct.
when they hear it. You're gonna, so first responders and their families have dark humor, so I have to be like really mindful to
Mm-hmm.
not say something to somebody that I think it's gonna offend when no
Yes.
intent. But you do, it makes you,
Yes.
it gives you that pause. It's taking that pause, and that's resiliency. And that's one of the amazing things as I listen every day, that's you're showing the resiliency to move on, to overcome, and to teach somebody from what happened to you. And they don't even need to know that it happened to
I
you.
just say I've experienced trauma, my family and I
Yeah.
just kind of keep it vague,
Yeah.
and just talk about how therapy, and as you know, therapy helped me so much immediately with that specific trauma. But then you learn, like, wow, I've had other trauma building up. I had anxiety. I still have anxiety, severe anxiety, depression. I have seasonal depression. I just got over that recently. And it's so common, but it's
Yes.
like we're we're told almost as society that it's a bad thing and it's a negative thing to talk about. And how dare you go to therapy? Like that should be a private thing. I know you and I just talked
Yeah.
about that. And of course everybody deals with things differently, but I've learned that opening up and talking about it to other people has truly helped me be better at those things and just notice signs and notice these things. And that's what I just want to get out there and let people know when I do my show is like, you don't have to deal with these alone. Exactly what you're feeling right now and then. It could seem so little, but it's so important to discuss it with, find one person to talk to about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I even offered like, email me, text me. I'd be more than happy to like, help you through it. Not that I'm a professional by any means in that field, but even just having a friend that you can open up to
Yeah.
discuss these matters is important to know that you're not dealing with by yourself.
It is. It's somebody who's not judgmental, who's just there to listen. And sometimes that's most of the time, probably 98% of the time, that's all people need is
100%.
to process it, get it off their chest, let it go. And
And I think
then,
the non-judgmental thing you just said hit it on the nail. You need somebody that you can trust that's not going to judge you or think like, who's this girl thinking that, And one thing I will point out too, something that I notice, and you listening may feel the same way. I sometimes felt like my problems weren't as important. They weren't as heavy or they weren't as traumatic as somebody else. Somebody else is going through something worse than I do. I don't want to take the time away from that person getting help. And I dealt with that too. We are all important. All of our needs, all of our traumas, whether they're little or ginormous, they're all so important to be, looked after and have somebody to talk about. And that was one of the things I struggled with is like, oh, I just have this one thing. But as you talked about, like first responders, they see this trauma 600 times a year or whatever you mentioned the statistic was. And is my one thing worth getting help for? 100%.
Absolutely. Because your one thing can be, we'll look at it. Your children experienced it, your dad, your husband, but you all are taking it in differently. So it might affect you more than them. It affected you more because your boys were there. So it's going, things like that people don't take into consideration. It's not one size fits all. Some things completely don't affect people because some things affect you and sit with you and never leave.
That's so true.
And finding the tools to learn to not do that. Therapy is awesome. Yep. Everybody, I don't care who you are, you should have a therapist.
100%. I talk about it, it literally changed my life. And I say that like it sounds extreme, but that's legit how extreme it was. Like I'm able to sleep now. I'm able to talk about it. I'm able to be a better mom. I'm better be a better friend. And just like it literally has changed my life. And just as a person, I feel like a completely different person going through therapy. She helped me with the trauma with that, but just outside of that stuff, as busy mamas and working full time, it's really hard to balance life and you have anxiety and you have all these things. And it's nice to have somebody that will help you through it. And that's the key part is there is somebody out there that can help you. Might not be the first person you talk to as the fit for you.
Right.
But there is somebody that'll match up and understand you and relate to you and help you get through it.
And in my case, coming out of my BS when I'm like, this is what I want. This is how it's going to be done. Because you have to have control of
That's me.
The next step. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm a control freak too. 100%. I say it.
I was told that you didn't have to give me your resume. I love her, by the way, my therapist. I love her.
Yes.
She's like, you gave me your resume. I'm like, well, I'm just not going to go through this 600 more times because I've had numerous counselors in life and I just don't want to waste my time or hers if it wasn't going to be a good fit.
A good fit. Yep. Yeah. And that's what people don't know, I think, about therapies too. Like, I don't know, my therapist in the beginning, we said like, hey, this is who we matched you with. You do like a consultation, they match you with somebody and they're like, the therapist might not think that they can help you either. Right. So if you go to a reputable, therapist, they might even say like, hey, I don't have the tools to help you with this specific thing, but we have so-and-so in our facility that can help you or whatever the case may be. So even they have options to say like, well, you might need a little bit more help in somebody who specializes in that field.
And that's the beautiful thing about that is, they will refer you to somebody else if they can't help you because
their job is to help you. That's what they want to do. They want you to be healthy and they want you to be happy.
Exactly. So you call, I had it up. I can't remember the exact name. You call your segment,
on Mondays, Mental Health Mondays.
Yes.
Or the feel good story. I do a feel good story.
You do both.
Too,
you do a feel good story every day, right?
I do.
But the Mental Health Mondays, I'm like, I knew, I apologize. I had it up and then all of a sudden my Zoom screen is there. So you don't call it Zoom. That's for sure.
Nope, I don't.
And can you give us a couple of the tips that you give on Mental Health Monday?
Yeah. So what I try to do is throughout the week, I'll read stories because I'm very heavy on like celebrities. And I know we all idolize them and think their lives are so perfect because they have the money, they have all this stuff. And even the young people listening, was so important to me because we do idolize them and we think their life is perfect. So I do try to, find stories of people going through those situations, or if they have some sort of mental health advice, or if they're talking about going to therapy, I do highlight those stories. And I just let people know, like, it can be life-changing. And any stories that pertain to that or somebody being better from going there. The one person I do talk about a lot is Selena Gomez. I don't know if you follow her career at all, but she is one that is such an advocate for mental health. And I follow her and I'm so inspired by her, even though she's younger than me. I'm so inspired by her words, how she's overcome it. So I do talk about her experiences. Adam Lambert, I don't know, I just featured him recently, just talking about all the mental health. Ed Sheeran, he's a huge superstar, and he just talked about how he was not okay and he had to go through therapy. So I just make it very regular. And anytime I see any, celebrity that we idolize, I'm just like, they're just like you and I. They are going to have problems. And you know what the solution was for every single one of them? Getting help. Every single one of them went to therapy for whatever. Every single one of them had a different issue that they had to deal with, but they all ultimately went there. So that's what I just try to highlight on Mondays, is anything that I've read or wanted to share and pass along that let people know, like, you're not alone on these segments when I do it on Monday.
Yeah. And it's so important. I get excited because I'll be sitting in the office. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic.
Yes. And any words of wisdom I get from my therapist, like I ask her, or if it's a specific topic that I knew that she helped me through, I open up and talk about it. Like, hey, whatever the case may be, this is what she told me. Oh, there was one thing, and I'm trying to remember, that was like, stuck with me. And I will say this I did share, and this I thought was so important. Weight has always been an issue of mine my whole life. That's how I coped. Like, some people do drugs, some people alcohol, food's my vice. Like, that's how I coped with before therapy. And the one thing that she said to me, and this is like something else I'll share on Mental Health Monday, is like, we criticize our bodies so much all the time, and we're so mean to ourselves. I would never look at somebody and be like, oh, God, your arms are so fat, or gosh, you're so fat, or anything. But I say that to myself, and that's not okay. That is so not okay to say.
No.
Like, why do we treat ourselves so terribly? And that's what I try to say. Like, why are we so truly mean to ourselves? Why are we so mean to talk? Like I said, I judged myself and said I was a bad mom because I didn't protect my kids the night of the trauma. When realistically, I did. I helped them. And we're just so mean to ourselves. So I try to just, like, self-love is another thing I try to talk about on Mental Health Mondays. Just like, give that time to yourself. Give your time. If you don't feel like cooking dinner, don't. Go eat a bowl of cereal. Go get McDonald's or a drive-through, whatever. You're allowed to be, and you're allowed to feel those feelings. Sometimes we don't have to be perfect, and it's hard. No. So those are some of the topics I try to do, is just like real life stuff that I know I deal with. And as a busy mama, there's lots of them out there who deal with the same similar things.
And you forget to take care of yourself. Even when you know you need to, you tend to forget to, but making it habit in advance.
Yes.
Because what we went through, I trained myself for 25 years that when the chief came to the door. So I was already mentally training myself for something that in that time I didn't know would realistically happen.
Yes.
So you have to, so I wasn't taking care of myself in that way. It helped me when the time did come to be like, okay, this is what I have to do. Da, 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 da. But here we are 4 years out. And now it's like, oh, I have to let things go. I understand as much as I can, because we will never understand what happens inside other people. We won't. But what we can do is at least let them know they have the support. Let them know that they can get help. They have to want to get help.
That's it.
But, and that's where having the conversation and moving it forward now come into play. Reteaching our kids how to talk or process and talk to ourselves, because we're our own worst enemy. And we tell ourselves stories that might make a good book, but they're not real.
Yes.
It might make a good horror story, but it's not ever going to happen. So
that is something I do with my kids too. I'm very open to them. Again, my 3-year-old, because of the trauma, and I want kids to know. And that's just what I decide to do as a parent, is to open up. My sons are both going to start therapy. Like, we're going to look into and get recommendations, just so they have that outlet, and to know at a young age, it's totally normal. It is totally fine. I take you to the doctor when you're sick for a cold and they give you medicine. If you're mentally sick and have some issues, it should be talked about too. Like, hey, I saw my therapist today. This is what they helped me through it. So I'm trying to normalize and to make it seem like it's a normal thing, because it is.
It is. And it doesn't pile up over childhood and teenage years and
that's what
failed relationships. And it's all
we have very open conversations. Yeah. My son's going to be 12. So I was like, let's get it now, because I know he's not going to want to talk to mom about, all that stuff. But I want him to know he has an outlet so that he doesn't build up.
Thank you for doing that, because that's not one thing that I did. That's one of my biggest regrets. I thought I was protecting the kids by not talking about things. It enhanced how they feel now, and how they aren't able to process through some things. They're a lot better now, but we still have some struggles. So rewording things and giving resiliency. One of the things I like to talk about to people, I always say, hey, if I'll have friends that will call me because they need to talk, and I love it. I go,
Me
but
too.
have a card and put 3 people down that you know that you could call at any time and be there. Because when you get in that heightened crisis mode, you're not going to think straight. You're not going to remember unless you do this before you get to that point and have that
Yes.
ready, and have 4 things that you can do for yourself or would do for yourself. And I've been telling people that. My counselor says to me, Christy, what's 5 things that you could go do for yourself after this session since it was so tough? I'm like, well, shit, I don't know.
Have a glass of wine or
Yeah.
whatever is your
Does that
head,
count?
right?
If it helps, we were talking about shots of Fireball yesterday. I'm
Right.
like, okay, you're going to try and make me an alcoholic if I have to
Right.
do that,
Right.
but I'll try. Challenge
Right.
accepted. But at the end of the day, we forget, first responders put their job before everything else, and they forget to take care of themselves.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you have to have something for yourself, because one day the job's not going to be there. Potentially your family won't be there. Life changes every day. You walk in a different person, you walk out a different person. We all do.
Yes.
It's the environment. So having those things and making it normal to get up and have that cup of coffee by yourself, or sit on the couch and not talk to anybody.
Yes.
My dogs even knew not to bother me till I had 2 sips of coffee in. Then they're like, okay, she's good.
Yeah, she's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she won't yell at us now.
And it's different for everybody. Like you
It
said,
is.
like you just have to have that time. I'm more of a night owl, so I'd like to have the time at myself, reflect a little bit. I read too. I don't know. That was been my new thing, is just like reading and getting my normal brain out of, just fantasy world or thrillers, which is probably not a good genre to read when you're in a, a traumatic.
I love
brain,
that stuff though. I'm like, because
too.
it's oddly, maybe because it relates to life,
Right.
and the way it
true.
shouldn't. It's the facts.
So
I'm
you'll be able to
intrigued.
find that. Yeah. If it's reading 20 minutes before you go to bed to turn your brain off from, the stuff you experience, like you said, first responders, if you had a really bad day. And that is one thing I do point out, is to almost like think about your day is like, yes, I had a really good day today. Like, or find something. And that's what I do on my show too, is just like, what is one positive thing that happened to you? Of course, there were 7,000 horrible things that could have happened.
Right.
This broke, you relate to this, yada, yada, yada. But find the one positive thing that happened. And it could be something as small, like some people will comment, like on the Facebook groups, like, I woke up today. I was blessed with another life. I woke up today. Or, to the extreme, like my daughter got married, or I won this, or whatever the case may be. But that's the advice I can give to somebody, is to find that one positive thing. If it was like, I got a hug from my kid today, you know what I mean? Anything small like that, to like bring that with you and keep that with you as well. If on top of therapy.
Absolutely. Because there's always a positive, and we fail to recognize them sometimes. So recognizing that positive, even in, a tornado came through here.
Yes.
Monday.
A couple days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of the blue. No,
Mhm.
no warning, no sirens. I was not too far from my house, because I live pretty close to you as well.
Yeah.
Not too far from my house. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't at home. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah. And the sirens didn't go off. Yeah. I was here in my basement, which was the safest place, but I didn't hear anything until after. It was like, oh yeah, one touchdown. I was like, whew. But again, that could have changed our lives in a second.
It could have. And I was on the
Mhm.
east side of Joliet, and they're like, hey, Christy, there's a tornado warning. I'm like, do you guys not hear the sirens here?
Right.
Like, no, we do. I'm like, well, then how's it a warning if they're not going off?
Right. Yeah.
And it got kind of ugly over there, but
Mhm.
not
quick.
Yeah. Yeah. So but the positive was the sun came
You're
out.
okay.
Yeah. We're okay. The sun came out, and
like
nobody
20 minutes later, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was beautiful.
And that's a good analogy for life too, because how fast and how dark and how quick our lives can change in one specific incident. Even in your day, you just got to find your way to the sunshine. That's a good analogy, right?
Yeah.
Like life can be tornadoes, but we just got to look for the sunlight.
So speaking of that, because you said seasonal depression, I have that. It's miserable. I have the happy light. I have one at my desk here in my studio office at home. I've got one at my desk at work.
I've never even
So,
heard of it. I need to look into this.
yeah.
Yes.
I know there was one going around the radio station sales group. They had one
Okay.
trying it out one time.
Okay. I'm going to have to go figure out who has it and test it
Yeah,
out.
it was a couple years ago. I
Okay.
can't remember who had it, but they were taking turns. But it does make a huge difference. So
That's
that's
good.
one thing, especially in this area when it gets so gloomy for so many months and you're struggling already, it
Mm-hmm.
amplifies that struggle. And those make a huge difference. And it could be a half an hour a day, could be 15
Yeah.
minutes a day. And it puts me instantly in a better mood.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. Cause January was rough. And I will say that, like, I always say, like, sometimes you have a bad day. I had a bad month, but I learned the tools on how to like address it. I was able
Yeah.
to tell my husband, like, hey, my head's in a really dark place. If I sit on the couch and just need to watch TV and eat some bonbons, let me just do it for a little bit.
Right.
And it's almost like that's the tools that you learn. Like, you just let people know around you and you just kind of cope, and you give yourself grace. Like, January was rough. It was a bad month. And people that have depression and anxiety, one thing that you probably know, you could have the happiest things going on in your life, and all of a sudden a switch flips, and
Yes.
you're like, because like in certain people, like in my family, again, they've like, oh, your life seems so great. Like, what could you be possibly to be depressed about? And you've probably heard that before. Like, you have good career, you got a great family, blah, blah, blah. Depression
Yeah.
doesn't care. It doesn't
No.
care what you have going on. It is going to hit you. It is going to come in anytime it wants to. And I don't want to say no controlling it. There's no controlling when it comes. You just have to find the tools on how to properly deal with it. And I did. I had it for the whole month of January was rough,
Yeah.
but I got through it.
And you have to sit there and still be on point for your job
Yes.
while it's
Yes.
eating
For
you
my
up
family.
inside. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
even in the like the first responder world, think about that. They
Yeah.
have to be on point all the time.
And
But we
successful. They have
yeah,
to. That's their, yes. People are
like it
depending
doesn't
on them.
affect them. It affects.
Yeah.
I've gotten really good at removing my emotion, trying to bring it back. It's been a little
Mm-hmm.
more difficult. I'm getting better at it, but I'm using words.
Yeah.
Instead of my middle finger.
Right. I was just going to say, yep, anger or
Yeah.
lashing out. And that's what I did. I will say that that's what I did notice where it got to a breaking point right after the trauma. I started noticing that's how I was coping
Yes.
with the pain that I was feeling and the sadness and the regret, every pain that I felt, that I was lashing out at my kids. I would scream at them, and my patience was like 0.2. That's it. Like, that's the extent of it. And I was lashing out at them and, getting frustrated with them quicker. And I noticed, I'm like, that's when I was like, something has to change. We were on vacation, and that's what triggered it for me. I was like angry, and I'm like, I'm on vacation with my family. I'm blessed to be here. But like I said, there's depression, and those things doesn't care. Like, it's not going to stop. You have to find ways to feel better from it.
Right. As soon as and we don't always know triggers, what's going to trigger us.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Correct.
But we can have those tools ready to go. Once it happens, you can turn it and change it and get out of it. Yes. And it teaches grace and forgiving yourself for things that you think you've done wrong or didn't handle right, because we're only human, and
absolutely
we don't know what we don't know.
Yes. And the guilt is real. So if you're listening and you feel it, the guilt or shame, like, I think a lot of people, feel shameful of going to therapy, or people make you feel shameful about going, that it's this bad thing. Like, how can you not deal with it and you're old? And I have dealt with it, family and stuff like that. Like, how do you, how are you not able to get through? I did this my whole life. And, you hear older generation in our family, like, well, I had this and I did this and I did this. Okay. But how much did you struggle? You don't have to do that. It's not required. There's so much help out there. Like, you don't have to be a superhero. We were not made to be superheroes. We were not made to take on this world by ourselves and to deal with all the problems by ourselves, and to feel the sadness by ourselves, and to feel the depression. And we were not made for that.
Not at all.
It's there. No. And I mean, kudos to, grandparents or great grandparents who felt like they did it all, which they probably did, but they probably, they struggled, and they
absolutely did.
More time to do for themselves and go out and, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But they didn't have any bills. They paid everything with cash.
That's true.
I don't understand.
And mamas didn't have to work a lot. It's just a different time. Like,
it is a different
clean
time.
The house and do this. And we have we do probably as adults now have a lot more responsibility and no time to, you think you don't have time to take care of yourselves.
Right.
You need to find that time, because that's more important than
That's
and
like
you'll
the
be
number
better
one
from it.
thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Take care of yourself.
Yes.
Don't be greedy with yourself. That's different, but take
And you
care of
are
yourself.
worth it. You are
Yes.
worth it. That is something I try to say. You are absolutely 100% worth it. Even if you think you're a terrible human one day because you did something wrong and yelled at your kids, you're normal. That's all normal stuff.
Yeah.
Quote unquote normal. I know that people say like I'm not normal. No, that's everybody goes through that.
We're all quirky and it's okay.
Yes. And embrace
That's what
our
makes it good.
differences. That's the big
Yes.
thing too. Like embrace our differences. We might all struggle with anxiety and depression here and there in certain things, but we're all allowed to be that. We should be embracing the greatness that we all have within ourselves, right?
That's right. That's right. And understand that so in the first responder world, taking medicine has been frowned upon, still
Mhm.
is frowned upon, but taking medicine is a tool that can
Right.
help you, coupled with counseling or other therapies that you may putting those two together doesn't mean you'll have to be on medicine the rest of your life. It
Yeah.
just means it's assisting you to get through the parts that you can't get through because it's so damaging inside you.
Yes. And it's not for everybody. There's
No.
tools for every single person. Some
Yep.
people really need the medicine and it's beneficial, but then other people might not necessarily. And again, we're all different. Our brains are all made up completely differently and we handle things completely differently.
We do. We do. What's one tip that you can give families after something like this happens and life settled back down, sorta? What's a tip that you can let them know getting through it is possible?
Have the conversations with your kids. I check on them. My little guy, he's 3, he's almost 4 now, but he still talks about it to this day, the experience. And I wasn't sure. I'm like, he's young, he's never going to remember it. So I had to talk to the therapy and he's always like, Mom, do you remember the shooting that happened? And I was like, and it breaks my heart, but I was like, what did it make you feel? So I just talked to him. And every family's different. Everybody parents completely differently. So I would never judge anybody on their parenting skills.
No.
But that was very important to us. Especially my older one, I had immediate conversations with him and I let him feel. And that's the advice I have is let them feel whatever they're feeling from it. My husband and my dad, they weren't traumatized at all by it. Like it was just like, that it didn't affect them, but it affected me and my boys.
Right.
Just have those conversations and let them be open to you. Let them feel when they're ready. Don't force it. And that was the one thing I had to make sure. My son wasn't ready to talk about it at first, and neither was my little guy, but just be open to the conversations and do not assume that you know what your kids are feeling and thinking because you don't.
Right. That's a
Especially from
huge
that. We
thing.
all deal with it differently. Yeah.
Yeah. We assume or we want to fix them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really good at telling them how they feel,
Mm-hmm.
but that's really how we feel.
Yes.
And letting them be open about it and give them the opportunity more than once because it takes a while to let them do that or get them
Yes.
to do that.
And I allow him to be scared. Like I'm okay. Like he's in baseball. That's our whole life. So sometimes it is at nighttime. So he just wants to hold on to me and he runs like in the dry. So that's just his way of dealing with it. And I let him, or
Yeah.
I try to get out of there immediately. We're not going to lounge and talk around because I know it affects him. So just kind of pay attention to what the triggers are for him. And I was like, okay, buddy, come on, let's go. We run to the car together just to get him through it. So he doesn't have like, a panic attack or anything.
Yeah.
And then I am working on getting therapy. So I'm been looking and, for pediatric trauma type stuff like that. So and I let him decide, like, would you like to talk to somebody? And he says yes now. So I'm
Look
allowing him
into
to.
look into a place called Beyond Healing Counseling. It's in
Okay.
Homer Glen. They have Homer
Okay.
Glen and Frankfurt. Though they have a great setup and a ton of counselors there that you're going to find the right fit.
Okay.
I would be surprised if you didn't find the right fit there and how they
Okay.
do it. So it's
Perfect.
a great spot. That's
And
where I have my daughter going. So
okay. Very
I
nice.
can I can
Yeah, and
say
my
it's made a
3-year-old,
difference.
like I said, I wasn't sure, but we just had a conversation the other day about it, and I let him know that it was okay to be scared and that mommy gets scared, and mommy was really scared that night too, and it was totally okay. But because my therapist was able to give me those tools, I told him like it was totally okay being scared, buddy. And if you get scared, but look at mommy and daddy were there, we protected you, so it's okay to be scared, but it's our job to do whatever we can to make sure you're safe. And look, you're safe. We were home. We're here. You know
Right.
what I mean? So I was just trying to reiterate those things to him. So that'd be the advice is don't assume you know what your kids are feeling and don't be fearful to have those conversations. I think with your kids, you may surprise yourself and maybe you might, I heal from it talking to my kids a little bit more too. And like realizing, okay, I didn't mess them up and failing as a mom. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Right. That is so true. Yeah. Cause I would never tell my kids how I felt
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want to burden them. But
Yes.
that's what I was taught through life on how to process things.
Yes.
So when my daughter had to tell me, Mom, it's okay to cry. Little did she
Yes.
know I would cry before I came in the house. I would cry
Mm-hmm.
when she went to bed, but I would be there and what I thought was present for them. But I also taught them not to talk
Yes.
and not to,
Because that's how we feel. Like you said, that's our way of protecting them.
yeah, yeah. And it's hard to be brutally honest because you have to be brutally
Yes.
honest with yourself. And
That is so true.
it doesn't make you weak if it
No.
affects you. Because like you said, it
Yes.
didn't affect your dad and your husband. It might
Mm-mm.
years down the road,
Right.
but it didn't affect them in that moment. And so that's the perfect proof that it if only if it affects everybody differently.
Yes. And it's hard having those conversations with my husband because he can't relate. That's why it's so important. You cannot rely on somebody in your life to understand what you're going through
Right.
because we all feel and think differently. Like he was great support once I decided to go to therapy, but he did not understand how it and why it was affecting me so much mentally, physically, like all of it. He couldn't understand it. He wasn't mean about it. He just
Right.
couldn't understand what I was feeling. And that's why I want people to know, like, you can't expect your significant other or your best friend to he wasn't judging, but he could not come from a place of relate to him. Even though he was there,
Right.
it didn't affect him and tear him apart like it did me.
Right.
So that's why we need outside help. We cannot just rely on people inside our home and expect them to help us when they don't necessarily understand why we're feeling the way we're feeling.
Right.
And
And
we
you
don't
do.
even understand sometimes why we're feeling the way we're feeling.
No, but you have the support in your home that allowed you to be
Correct.
able to do that. It wasn't any
Yes.
judgment, and that's
Yep.
key. There's no judgment. It's a strength to be able to say, "Hey, I need help," or "Hey, this
Mm-hmm.
affected me." That's a strength. Wearing
Yes.
your emotions on your sleeve or being open and honest is a
Yes.
huge vulnerability is such a strength to have, but we fear it because it's
Yes.
unknown. And it opens us up to things that then you're like, I don't know. What is somebody going to think of me? Who cares what
Who
somebody thinks of
cares?
you?
You will
Yeah.
learn, and I have learned so much. I've always been a people pleaser
Yeah.
and, worried about what people think. And therapy, they'll learn as long as you have a core five. My number's five. Like if I can have five strong, amazing people, those are the people's opinions I care about. Those
Right.
are the people that I don't want to let down. They're the ones I value, their opinions. Everyone else, if they want to think that way, that's on them. That's their problem, not mine.
Right.
And you'll learn that eventually. And not in a mean way, but
No,
whatever their feelings are, that shouldn't affect my day.
but it does feel mean
Yeah,
because
it
you don't
does.
care.
Yes.
And it's not that you don't care. That's it, like that cycle. And why
Yes.
I think we don't do it because, well, I don't want somebody to know. I don't want them to
Mhm.
think differently of me. To I don't care what you think.
Yes.
And then you need to not care what yourself thinks about getting help and what
Yes.
yourself thinks about needing to express it. It's the inner bully that we fight
Hmm.
ourselves. That's just our story that's supposed to be written on paper for entertainment. It is not
Correct.
reality.
It is not real life, 100%.
Right. So
And I
do
feel
you?
so much stronger as a person going to. Like,
Yes.
I feel like a completely different person. I've never felt this amazing. And it's so crazy because I went from this horrible, 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 dark place where I did not see an end in sight. I just saw myself going down the dark rabbit hole. And to be on I've never felt this amazing about myself. And because you feel selfish thinking good things about yourself. This is the
Yes.
first time like I'm starting to love and like notice the amazing things that I can do. Like, and it feels weird and it's hard to get used to, but there is so much light and it might be the lightest you've ever felt in your whole life after going through and finding the help that you need. The dark place seems so never ending, as I'm sure you've probably experienced, but then
Yeah.
coming out the other end, truly have never felt this amazing about life in general, even in the dark days. I
Yeah.
know I can get through it.
Exactly.
I feel stronger from it. Yes.
You can sit there for a minute. You just can't live there.
Yes.
Yeah, I can even now I've noticed so a lot of trauma in life in general. But since I've been back in therapy, I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore. I don't have to constantly know where every exit is and why it's there.
Yes.
I still do it naturally, but
Yeah.
I'm not checking it 4, 5, 6 times when
Yes.
I'm
I'm
there.
with, right. I get
Yeah,
it.
which is
You're there, you're
fantastic.
cautious, but it's not controlling your whole
Yes.
life anymore.
Yes. And it's
I'm
the
still working on that
weirdest,
myself too. Yes.
it's the weirdest feeling,
Hmm.
because then you think if you catch yourself and realize you're like, well, something's wrong. I'm not checking everything. What am I do? But
Yeah.
you're not. That's healing.
Yes.
It's healing. Books wise, I know you love books. You have 96.7 book club.
Yep.
Um, and you're always picking books. Do you have any resiliency books? Um, good feel, mental health, overcoming, you're not alone type books?
Yeah. So there's actually a book that we've been featuring, and I ironically have it sitting next to me because I will be giving them away on my show, Mental Health Monday, the whole month of March. I haven't read it personally myself, but I've heard really good things. It's brand new. It's The Answer to Anxiety. I could probably hold it up there too.
Oh God. Oh, that's perfect.
And it's not very long, so it's not like you're going to spend forever reading it. And it says on the front, how to break free from the tyranny of anxious thoughts and worry. So I was like, yes. And it's a #1 New York Times bestselling author of Battlefield of the Mind, which I did not read as well, but this is on my list to read. So, um, and it says, this one has a little bit of a religious tie to it and
Yeah, Joyce
that type of thing.
Myers is
Yeah.
a Christian
Yes. So it's a Christian based
public
anxiety
speaker.
book.
Yeah,
So might not please to everybody, but I am all about learning ways and finding any way I can feel better about myself and about things in
absolutely.
life.
So we're gonna I'll get it like a list of books, short
Yes.
books, because when you're reading about anxiety, depression, those real life feelings, I think a shorter book is a little bit easier to take
Yes.
in. But yeah, I will get
Yes.
some together for you because I have,
Yes, please. I would love to share them in the book club. We
yeah,
can do a whole thing with it. Absolutely.
yeah, that would be fantastic because it's
Yeah, I
important
read more
because,
thrillers right now.
yeah,
Like I
me
said,
too.
they like because it's unrealistic, even though it's like stuff that probably makes me have more anxiety about certain. Like I'll never go to just from reading these books, I'll never go to a rest stop ever because it's
Yeah,
a book I read, like just things like that. So I
book
probably
you
shouldn't
read.
read them, but
I
I
just got to
love them.
stop listening to the news. Then I'll be okay.
I don't do that. That's the one thing I
Yeah.
did learn for myself. I can't. And when people start talking about it, I cannot because I know that for me, that's a trigger just hearing,
Yeah.
especially like the shootings and another person
Yeah.
passed away like that. I know is not good for my mental health. So I
Right.
avoid it for my own self so that it doesn't bring up old feelings and
Yeah. I
that
do.
type of
I've
stuff too.
tried to do that for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of started watching news again. It was more for the weather or background noise. I'm like, I gotta take it
Mm-hmm.
out again.
Just turn the radio on
And
instead.
I know. I know. Well, when
And
I
that's what I do.
do,
Positive stories. I do not talk about any of that from day one.
yeah,
Once I started, I was like, we have so much negative. My whole show is going to be happy stories, things people are doing in the community for one another. I rarely, if ever, will talk about like a headlining news story because blah, we have too much of that already.
right.
And
You're
that's just
getting
my
that
own
on other
personal thing.
stations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. If that's your thing, I would not judge you by any means. But for me, that is something for my own mental health. I need to just talk about happy and positive things.
Right.
Yeah,
Entertainment does not have to be frightful.
correct. Yes,
And not every media person is a negative person.
correct.
Those one, to me, when they're bringing out the negative stories, you can breeze by it. Like this is what's happened in the news. But when you're bringing it back and bringing it back, you're struggling with something and you're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to keep that pot
Stirring up a
stirring.
little bit.
Yeah.
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 And
Absolutely.
that's not for me. The negative, I can't because it eats at my soul. And I know that. And it
Yeah.
triggers other thoughts. And I try to stay on the positive path. And talking about it for me is healing too. If I just keep bringing up positive and talking about it on my show, it's also healing and a reminder for myself like, yes, I got this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
You're reteaching your brain to stay off that
Correct.
other wheel that keeps spinning. It's off. It's retract.
Yes.
Fantastic. I try and obviously families or family first responder families and first responders are near and dear to my heart. But the important thing is groups, like peer support type groups. And what you're doing for on the show, that's a group to me. That's a peer group that's there, and anybody gets to be a part of it. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do, you're a part of it. And so when you have that and you say, I'm okay now or I'm good, I realized a couple weeks ago, my friends, I did a buddy check. So I do buddy checks, check in. Hey, how are
That's
you?
amazing. I did the same.
Good, good. And she goes,
Mhm.
I'm good or I'm
And you know, that's
okay.
not right, right?
No, no. And so I said, well, what is good to you? And her response was in things that were good in life, but I'm good is not, you're not okay. You're not good.
Mm-mm.
What is something that if I were to say, what's good to you? What is something that's good?
Oh, that's a good one. Let's see. Something good to me. Obviously I say my family. Gosh. Health. I think mental health obviously now has been so something I talk about regularly. I mean, it comes out of my mouth every conversation I have with somebody. So something good for me is just feeling good again. And being able to pass on some of the things that I've learned and just the positive vibes. That's something good, I would say, is just being able to almost give back. Like that's something I feel I'm deep in my soul is just to like try to help others, and that feels good to me. So that could be a way to feel good is just being able to, pass on what I've learned and just know that, be that support for them, I guess, too.
And that's fantastic because in the end, even if you're just quote unquote
Good.
good,
Mm-hmm.
that means that you're just struggling in that moment. But
Mm-hmm.
now you just said things that kind of bring it back like, wait, I am good. Look at, I talk
Yes.
about mental health and I'm healing.
And I will say, if you feel like you're in a dark place, I was there. I was in a very dark place. And so this was my dream to eventually why I went to therapy. My goal of therapy is to like, just to feel good. But there are days I feel great. And you know what I
Yes.
mean? That's like goes above and beyond just feeling good again.
And if
And I
somebody's
will,
asking you how you are, oops, I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
If somebody's asking you how you are, be honest
Yes.
because we'll call you out on it.
And that's exactly those exact words I was just going to say. Even coworkers, I'll see them and I'm like, hey, how are you? And the people that I ask, if I'm being honest, are the people I genuinely do care. I don't
Yeah.
just, and that's something me personally, I'm not just going to be like, hey, how's it going? Great, great. Okay, good, good. You know what I mean? Like when I'm going up to somebody, like I'm legit saying, like, hey, how are you? Or if I know they have struggled with stuff, there's a couple handful of coworkers, I won't throw their names out there, but I would like go up to them, like, hey, how you doing? Good. No, I feel it. I hear it. Let's talk about it. Shut the door. Let's have a conversation and let's be real and open and honest with each other. Like, you're having a bad day. I can tell. What is it? If you want to tell me, if not, let's get through it together, kind of thing. And I will take that extra fight. And I think that's so important to do somebody too. Like our conversation, our 5-minute conversation. Yeah, we're all busy. Of course, I was probably going into a meeting, but that meeting can wait, honestly, 5 minutes
Right.
to make sure that a coworker that I care about is doing okay.
I love that you said 5 minutes because
Mm-hmm.
when Ken died, my
Mm-hmm.
son was in Explorers, Plainfield Explorers, and he wanted to go in still that day. It was like 2 days after. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
cool, but I'm coming in and I would like to talk. And my thing was, you know what, guys? If you think somebody's off, happier, sadder, indifferent, whatever that looks like, give them 5 minutes because
Mm-hmm.
that 5 minutes can de-escalate that feeling or that
Yes.
that suicidal ideation, whatever's going on in
Yes.
their mind. It will de-escalate it. It might only de-escalate it then, but they have that reprieve and they can get
Yes.
through. And then maybe when you're constantly doing the buddy checks or knowing that they see you're actually there to support, they may be willing to go get help then.
Absolutely.
So thank you for
And
doing
just
that for
starting
them.
that, absolutely. It's didn't do it before. It's something I've learned and
Yeah.
knew that if I can literally change one person's brain for, like I said, 5 minutes, or
Yeah.
they changed it. And I've had many people say, like, and just if you have a conversation, anybody listening, have that conversation. I've had one person in particular who she said, I'll say she, coworker said I inspired her so much just talking to her and being open and not judging her. And she texted me like 10 times after the fact, like, thank you so much for
Aw.
taking time out to like talk to me and get me through it. I feel so much better. And that alone was just like And I didn't do anything. I'm not a professional. I
Right.
literally just let her talk and let her have that space to feel like she can open up and talk about what she's feeling. And I think it's so important to find that and just do that for somebody else or
Right.
find it for yourself.
And let them talk and you actually listen,
Yes.
not listen to respond.
Yes.
I think that's a big thing for society in general.
Yes.
We're listening to respond because I don't know why we do.
Mm-hmm.
Just we do. I think to respond because we don't want to talk about ourselves. We don't want to feel, or we're struggling with what they're saying. Because what you see in other people struggling, you're probably struggling with yourself.
Or have at one point in your
Yeah.
life. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But deep breaths and let them talk. Because like you said,
Yes.
it just makes a difference. You
And
don't have
acts
to
of
be.
kindness. This is big for me too. Like I brought her
Yes.
coffee that day. I was like, I know you're having a really bad day. Here's a really big coffee for you.
Aw.
and she drinks it every day now too. She says it all the time, like the specific person, because she's like, it just reminds me of like just good stuff. And literally, $5 and 5 minutes is what I spent on that day, and it made a difference in her life.
So she can do that every Tuesday morning when I'm there.
Right, right.
Have it sitting there for me.
Yep.
I'm just kidding.
But yeah, so that's just what I do personally. I just tried like those small random acts, and that's obviously
Yes.
you hear me talk about it. Just those small things. If you're in a drive-through, and what I like to do, I don't know if anybody else notices, if I know somebody behind me is like honking their horn and being rude, I will buy their lunch that day. And just like, you think the opposite. I'm like, they're obviously triggered and having a horrible
Yes.
day to be a mean person that they are. So let me just do the one little act of kind of, I'll buy your $7 lunch or whatever it is, or
Yes.
coffee. You know what I mean? Just to be like, almost to snap their brain out of it. Like, okay, I'm
I
better even for 5 minutes.
I do that too. I try, although I'm trying not to go through drive ups very often anymore, just trying to save
I
money.
get it.
But when I do, I try and buy the person's behind me.
Yep.
And I did that one day, and then I was on my way to a network meeting, and
Mhm.
she happened to be going the same way. I'm like, what the heck? Is she following me? And she's like, I'm not following you. I live out this way. I just want
Aw.
to say thank you so much. It was so nice. I'm like, you're welcome. Like I
Isn't it the
just
best
tried.
feeling? You've had it
It
happen
is.
to, I've had it only happen to me. Not only I'm grateful for it, like 2 times, and I couldn't believe it. It was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, you know what I mean? It was just
Yeah,
literally, it was coffee at that time, a coffee drive through. But I was like, it was just that little thing triggered, like, just, yes, there's so much good in this world, even though we focus on
yes,
so much bad. And
yes,
that's what I try to do, is to highlight the good, because
yes.
and that's the hardest thing is you could have 7,000 amazing things happen to you. And the one negative bad thing, which is what happened to me, that's what consumed my brain. And it's
Yep,
crazy that society, our brains, we all go to the bad thing instead of like, no, there's so many amazing things here. But that's just,
absolutely.
yes. So I try to do at least one good thing, at least not a week, if not a day, depending on where I am and what it is. So,
So when I get my bag of Badge Brew coffee,
mhm.
I'm gonna put some in a baggie for you and try it. It is the
Nice.
best
Okay.
coffee. So Badge Brew
Okay.
is they're based out of Naperville actually, or
Oh, like local. I love supporting
yeah,
local. Hmm.
Evanston Cop started. That's his way to decompress, roasting his own, I would
I
say his
like
own
it.
eggs, his own beans. And then he
Maybe he does
started
the
it.
eggs too.
Yeah. Sorry, Mike. But at the, you never know. The price that he could make on that now.
That's what I'm thinking, right? He might
Yeah.
be a new hobby for him.
Right. Right. But it's the greatest coffee. And actually the first response brew, they give 10% back to First Help. So
I love
trying
that.
the coffee, I will bring it in. I should be getting some
Yes,
here
please.
soon because I just finished mine. So hopefully my order comes in
Okay.
soon. And then I will
Okay.
bring it in for sure.
Okay. Maybe we could take a picture or take it too. We can, spread some love
Yes,
for them too, because that's amazing.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know
I
if you noticed my feel good stories too. Sorry,
no,
I highlight first responders all the time on there too.
I
Like it's
know.
just something like saving a dog in a tree or something. And it's like,
Yeah.
again, first responders going above and beyond to help other people. And like you said, they do so much, and they're probably so undervalued and underappreciated for their job. And it's
Oh,
so
they
sad.
absolutely are. They
Mm-hmm.
absolutely are.
Underpaid, I'm sure too, but that's a whole
Uh-huh.
other story.
I
Mm-hmm.
know. I know. That's a story for another day.
Right.
Another
Not this
podcast.
podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
Chapter 2 in 2 weeks
Right.
we'll have.
Right.
Well, Jillian, thank you so much for being on and being so proactive and open on air. with hundreds of thousands of people listening to you that you're
thank
making
you.
a change. You may never even realize it, but you're making a change. And I look forward to getting to know you more as we work together anyway. But
Yes.
thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you for everything that you do. And I appreciate you having me on today. It's been fun.
Yeah, little. We are excited to be able to start our day with Badge Brew Coffee. Hey, Robin, did you know that Badge Brew has a new charitable badge collab roast?
Hey, Christy, I thought I heard that was going to happen.
Yeah, it's called First Response Roast with a spicy, smooth, medium roast with flavor notes of spice cake and citrus undertone.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And if that doesn't tempt our audience, a portion of the proceeds go to First Help. Oh, and don't forget, they're first responder family owned. Whether you're on day shift, night shift, or the shift of raising your family, Badge Brew has your coffee ready and waiting.
So let me ask you, what's your badge of honor? Find out by going to badgebrewcoffee.com and order yours. If you want the first response roast, click on Charitable Badge Collab. I know I am.